So this is the first edition of the Khudilar campaign. Khudilar. Khudilar is a Siloti word, Sylhet, Sylhet, which is the anglicized name of Silot, Seelot. And Silot is the language, Siloti is the language, and Silot is the region in generally the northeast of the subcontinent. And it is not very far from China. On the one hand, not very far from Nepal, and of course, not very far from Burma. And Siloti is the language spoken by millions of people, and the Siloti language has been spoken for at least 2,000 years, if not for longer. And the Siloti language, it can be used as one of the common kind of group of languages or families of languages that include the Devanagari kind of script and the Sanskrit, the Urdu, the Persian, and of course Bangla and Hindi, and literally hundreds of languages across the subcontinent. And Siloti is a major language in terms of the number of people speaking it and the kind of length of time over which it has been spoken. And as with everything else in the subcontinent, the Siloti language has been impacted by the various political kind of changes, upheavals, etc., etc. And so Siloti language is spoken in regions that previously were controlled by the Mughals and the non-Mughals, if you like, the various names. And so therefore it is an expansive kind of language and culture. And the Siloti language received probably its biggest kind of single boost during the arrival of the saint, who is variously reported to have been born in either Turkey or in Yemen. And his name is Hazrat Shah Jalal. Shah Jalal, and his title, designation, based on his life is Muzarrad. That's an Arabic, Muzarrad, and it is followed, the Muzarrad is followed by the word Yemen. So according to that line of kind of genealogy, he came from Yemen. Whether he was born in Yemen or in Turkey is still unsettled. So he had 360 followers. So his name was Shah Jalal Muzarrad-e-Yamani, the bachelor from Yemen, or the Yemeni bachelor, whatever. And he never, that is the kind of line of tradition that has been passed down. He never saw an adult woman in his life. So that was the reason why he is called Muzarrad Yemeni. And he was a lifelong celibate person. And he's revered by people both in Silot itself and beyond, from beyond. Now, the saint had other highly kind of regarded, well, all his 360 followers were all highly regarded. but somewhere closer to him in terms of the comparison and the kind of ranking that have been assigned to them. So the next one is said to be related in terms of his kind of sister's son, or his, yes, that is what has been said about the other one next to him, who is called Shah Farhan. Now, Farhan is a Siloti word. It's for heart. Whether that name was kind of given to him while he was alive and with his active kind of knowledge and participation or not is not known. Now, the reason why I'm saying so many things not certain and not agreed and not settled is for the reason that there is no kind of comprehensive, evidential, historic kind of biography or biographies of these saints, and the main saint, the Shah Jalal. And Silot is kind of, it transcends the various political kind of changes that have happened. And the tradition of Silot around the 360 saints and the Saint Shah Jalal is a unique tradition. It is kind of, the next one is in Chittagong, where the saint is called Bayezid Bustami, and he is revered as well. But we have in Silot, or the Siloti people have kind of not enough information about the Saint Bayezid Bustami, but except that the Saint Bayezid Bustami is still revered, and his kind of grave and his shrine treated with exceedingly high respect and regard, just as the shrine of Shah Jalal and the shrines of his 360 followers are treated. Now, at this time, I don't know where the full list of the shrines are, or is where the shrines are. I haven't seen the full list of the locations. I have visited one particular shrine outside of the shrine of the Shah Jalal Mazar Yamani, and that is not far from where I was born. Not far, by that I mean about within 3 miles, let's say. And within about 4 miles in the other direction from where I was born is another shrine. So the shrine that I did visit is in a place called Dhaka Dokkin. It is a shrine to the north of where they're building the kind of small hill where the school and college are. And that shrine, at this time, I have no kind of recollection of the name of the saint, but he is recognized as a saint. And the extra kind of out of this world kind of atmosphere that I felt when I went up the hill where his shrine is still with me. It is nothing like the feeling of being on top of a hill or a mountain, but that one, when I got there, I walked up there, climbed up there a few times, and every time I had the same feeling. It is the feeling of serenity and a kind of peace that I have not experienced anywhere else. And there is this instant impact in terms of the kind of awareness of something different happening there. Totally peaceful, silent, and absolutely engrossing. And it has been said that this shrine that I did have the kind of opportunity to visit a few times and say my prayers. I mean, I said my prayers during the day when I visited that shrine, is connected with the next one, not far, maybe about 2-3 miles. That is the one that is, the name is called Kailash. Kailash, the hill, Kailash hill, Kailash Tilla or Tilla. It has been said that these shrines are connected in a way that is only kind of explicable by reference to aeronautics. It's not a connection that is explicable by any other means. It's an aeronautical connection, like they are aerially connected without any wiring, but they are aerially connected. And it has been said that all these shrines are connected with one another, and the entire network of the shrines are thereby connected that way. It has been said by extension, but I have to say that the secular kind of mullahs or Muslims, by that I mean the Muslims that claim to be politically Islamic, they oppose most of the narratives surrounding the saints. Now, the majority of the people in Silot and the majority of the people who revere these saints and these saints in Chittagong and others, there are saints and shrines in India, and all the way across the subcontinent, going to Turkey on the one hand and Persia on the other, and of course Saudi Arabia. There are any number of shrines of saints, and there has been not enough investigation into the various connections and the various antecedents and various sequences over the last 700 or 800 years or 900 or 1,000 years. But the saints spread across the subcontinent and the neighboring countries over the last 1,400 years. And the most important kind of statement that the saints have made is that they appealed to people who are not necessarily Muslim or believers in Islam or believers in any known kind of faith. So they had as I said, transcendental kind of appeal, which are active to this day. They were not doing what is known as warfares and military adventures or anything like that. In fact, they did the opposite. They kind of traveled, but mainly meditated in silence, and that is what they did. And so therefore, the lesson from what they did and they still represent is a lesson for a peace that is deeper and wider spread than any of the current and contemporary kind of descriptions of peace has conveyed. So the Siloti word Kudilar, I devised it And the work of the campaign, the Khudilar campaign, has been peaceful and moral and ethical, not involving a single intentional breach of anybody's laws or anybody's kind of rules. It is based on ethical and moral universal principles. And we can say that the Khudilar campaign has beaten the toxic, poisonous, lying agendas and narratives that have been put in our way in terms of the principles. And there are too many toxic, dishonest, lying couriers of messages. These couriers have all kinds of claims to all kinds of religions and faiths, including Islam. And our campaign and the movement do not judge any of those people based on their pretensions to any religion. Whoever they are, whatever religion or faith or locus they kind of pretend to. The only basis for our judging them is on the evidence of their conduct. And the evidence is verifiable by universal criteria, which means that the verification must be equally available to people of all backgrounds, religious and otherwise. That is universal. So the Khudilar campaign, Khudilar, Khudeelar, Khudilar. As I said before, it's a kind of nearest translation or interpretation in the context of European languages is the French cry, oh yeah. But Khudilar is wider and longer distance traveling than oh yeah ever can do. There is no equivalent word in English or Anglo-Saxon. So oh yeah is the one that is the nearest one from a combination of backgrounds. Now, Khudilar is a Siloti language word, has got three dimensions immediately. One was that the bad people or the bad forces are kind of engaged in or about to start to engage in destroying, unsettling our home territory, home place, area. And the other is that they are kind of doing damage to the soil and the earth and the location of the land. And the third is they're about to come and drive us away from the area of our home area. These are the three dimensions that they contain hundreds of sub-dimensions, if you like. And it is kind of a cry, a shout, a warning that encompasses and contains the warning by the good, for the good, against the bad, going back millions of years. That is the message. And it doesn't need Khudilar. The word Khudilar is instantaneously understandable to every Siloti speaking person. And there is no such word that has been used, one word used as the banner, as the warner, and as the mobilizer for any campaign that I know. And therefore, this Khudilar world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street has to be put in this context, that Fleet Street, in terms of our moral, ethical, universal kind of probe and investigation, the role of the English language newspapers, England-centric Little Englanders, and the racist papers, their role is of smaller impact than the range and the horizon and the dimensions that we address in our outlook and our survey and our investigation and our engagements. Kudilar, in other words, is a truth-seeking, truth-telling, truth-searching campaign and a call and a movement, a part of the movement for the defense of the community in the East End of London by upholding universal values. That means that we are not physically or mentally, intellectually confined to the particular geographic area of East London, although it is part of our immediate physical activities and engagements. So when we say that somebody is a liar, we don't say that because we have a kind of hostile attitude towards them. When we say that somebody is a crook, we don't say that because we have got an agenda against them personally. When we call somebody a racist, liar, and a crook, we do not have any shortage of alternatives if those alternatives would fit. For example, the current kind of local vibration is taking place in East London, Tower Hamlets and Newham, over the formal removal of the post of elected mayor. Now, the incumbents in Tower Hamlets and Newham are John Biggs in Tower Hamlets and Roxana Fias in Newham. Those two incumbents, entirely based on their behavior and conduct in public office, we have called them liars. In the case of John Biggs, we have called him a habitual racist criminal liar. And Fias, we haven't called her racist for the simple reason of the evidence, but we have called her a mental slave and a criminal and a liar. These are based on evidence of their behavior. Now, these two kind of symbolize, if you like, embody the bad things that are added to the democratic kind of structure of the locally elected councils. So these embodiments must be removed, and the structure, the excuse, the pretext for keeping the corrupt persons in post must be removed. So that's what we are arguing for, and we shall be arguing for during the whole kind of period until the referendum is held in both Tower Hamlets and Newham. We know that both the incumbents, John Biggs in Tower Hamlets and Roxana Fias in Newham, they actually want to keep the system. Astonishingly, as does anybody else who has been discredited while they were in post, and they still believe that they are being discredited and proven as liar and crooks, has not played any part in convincing them that they are not suitable to seek the public's confidence. But there is this tendency on the part of discredited, crooked incumbents in that post before, that they're trying to get back and they're trying to join the clamor for retaining this corrupt post of executive mayor, elected mayor in Tower Hamlets and in Newham. So we shall be citing examples. For example, in January 2013, I presented a question to the formal sitting of the Tower Hamlets Council. By formal sitting, I mean the assembly of elected councillors sitting in what was called a kind of full council. And the question, as I retrieved it this morning from the council, Tower Hamlets Council's website, the question that I put, let's see if we can find it. Question that and the question is about Tower Hamlets people's education, life, and history archive. That is the question I asked, and I said, will the council in principle support this? Now, what I did not have the time to elaborate on because of the very severe limitation put on anyone who is not a councillor but is putting a question. So it's a few minutes altogether. And what happened in that question? I'm going to read this answer that they provided. This question was about principle. And because of the time, I didn't elaborate on it. But when I said that the Tower Hamlets People's Education, Life, and History Archive, now if you read that literally, you can see the Tower Hamlets People's Education, Life, and History Archive. That contains everything, current and past. Now, what I didn't elaborate on or include in detail because of time was that I had already created that archive. Remember what I'm saying. I had already created that archive, and I had created that over decades of exclusive work that I had been doing, and I'm still doing the work. And it was that archive, it was not only not being supported by Tower Hamlets Council, but that archive was targeted for destruction by Tower Hamlets Council with the active knowledge of the person in post as incumbent mayor, Lutfur Rahman. So the question should have been a simple yes, that they would support it. But they didn't say that. The answer that they actually gave was mouthed by a councillor who is no longer a councillor, called Rania Khan. Now, Rania Khan was described as cabinet member for culture. Now, my question was not about culture. It's about Tower Hamlets people's education, life and history is much more than culture and much more precise than culture. And in the context of the attacks that had been taking place against the archive that I had already built over decades, that urgency was not evident in the contents of what Rania Khan mouthed, and she could not have kind of written it or scripted it. It could only have been written and scripted by at least 4 or 5 criminals who gave it to her to mouth that pack of lies. Remember, the archive, the location of the archive changed at least 20 times across East London over the previous decades. And this time, it was 2013, my daily contacts with the kind of Tower Hamlets crooked council clique fronted by Lutfur Rahman as incumbent so-called mayor was about that archive. And if anyone kind of paused to think about what I was asking, because I had to submit this kind of question quite a while in advance of that particular date of the meeting. So they had enough time to consider its immediate reason and the impact of what they were going to say. And they said something totally criminal. Criminal as defined in ordinary English law, and criminal as defined in most faiths, including Islam. It's a sin. So they were lying on purpose on every level. And this is what the record that I've retrieved this morning from the internet says. So they're putting my kind of question in a kind of paraphrase. They're saying, will Tower Hamlets Council support in principle the Tower Hamlets People's Education, Life and History Archive? That is a move to record and chronicle for present and future. That is the paraphrase they've got. Generations. The lives of all the people who make up this community. That is how the paraphrased it. And the rest of the record online says, response by Councillor Rania Khan, cabinet member for culture. And she is, according to this record, she spewed this one. This administration recognizes the importance of local history projects and histories of all communities that make up our Bara. Now, that is grotesque distortion and stupidity. My question was not about these banal words, history projects and histories, at all. So whoever wrote that stupidity was committing many layers of criminality and denials and lying. And then she spewed, they strengthen community cohesion and reinforce our one Tower Hamlets policy in the Bara. What the F? For example, the mayors saved Bancroft Library from the previous administration's intentions to dispose of it. Now, there is no evidence that Lutfur Rahman saved the Bancroft Library at all. Bancroft Library was under attack by the Labour Party, and the attack was opposed by campaigners, not by Lutfur Rahman. And a number of campaigners were then joined by opportunistic kind of elements, including Ted Jory, who was at the time still connected with the East London idiotizer. Now, the Bancroft Library had been there as a local library, let's say, local history library. The contents, the idea of the local history library in Tower Hamlets had been there long before Lutfur Rahman was biologically born. And there is no record, there is absolutely no record anywhere of any statement made by Lutfur Rahman about anything in Tower Hamlets of any value. That is the statement I've made. And I stand by this based on the evidence. And as to why then Lutfur Rahman was chosen to be the candidate for mayor, the answer is because he was empty of any substance. And he remains empty of substance. And he gets emptier every time he issues something or circulates some kind of intention that he's going to support this kind of mayor position. And Rania Khan's stupidity continues. A number of organizations have already indicated their support for this project. And the project is not about the one I was referring to, but a Youth Initiative UK. What a load of absolute criminal stupidity that Rania Khan kind of inflicted on the air and on the space there at this meeting. But because of the corrupt nature of these formalities, I didn't have the time, as I said, they severely restrict the time, to challenge her and to cross-examine her and interrogate her on every element of her stupid utterance. And they say under summary of supplementary question from Mr. Muhammad Haq. That is their summary, not mine. They didn't ask me for comment, and I'll kind of. It says, as far as possible in the current economic climate, will the council be able to offer practical support to this organization? That is what I was talking about, my project. And they say the summary of Councillor Rania Khan's response to the supplementary question. We recognize the importance of the project. We have a history of supporting the preservation of the Bara's history, and we'll offer support where we can. How dare she? How dare she? She doesn't know where she comes from, and she doesn't know how she became a councillor, and she doesn't know what Tower Hamlets is, and she doesn't understand a single aspect of what I asked and what I've been doing. So this is an illustration of the corruption and the criminality and the denial that is perpetrated if there is a post called mayor, because that idiotic criminal lying was done to please or kind of suit Lutfur Rahman's state of denial. And what they did to the archives of course, was to kind of destroy the work and to steal or aid and abet the criminals, including the criminals from the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative and the Spitalfield Small Business Association. When I say the Spitalfield Housing Cooperative criminals, I refer to the criminal, in particular one criminal that was employed there and was sacked because she was caught lying and dishonestly issuing a certificate to justify the corrupt allocation of housing for a relative of a person she was personally very close to, who also was on the committee of the Spitalfields Housing Association. The cooperative became the association by that time. And the person who was brought in to investigate told me the details of what happened. And this criminal, calling them criminal doesn't do their actual behavior, the role, the evil, enough kind of representation. It doesn't represent the extent of the badness that they are. The damage that she did together with the criminals and the Spitalfield Small Business Association cannot be measured in physical terms. Just like the Tower Hamlets Council's corrupt criminal statement mouthed by Rania Khan cannot be measured for the contemptible role that played and the contemptible kind of impact and implications that typified and embodied. There is nothing, including the Bancroft Library, it's not the Bancroft Library, it's the Tower Hamlets local history library. And even that doesn't, the Tower Hamlets local history library doesn't have most of the records. In fact, it doesn't have records of the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets or in the UK. Whereas I had the complete record of decades. The decades, more than 50 years, starting from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the 200s. So the attacks began to take place, say, in 2011, in that form, when Lutfur Rahman became involved as the incumbent post holder as mayor, responsible for answering fact-based, evidential demands as to why he was allowing the crimes to continue. Remember, I spoke to Lutfur Rahman on the 29th of October 2010 in Brick Lane, just at the entrance of the Brick Lane to the Brick Lane Jama Mosque or Central Mosque. And Lutfur Rahman said to me on that day that he would talk to me after getting settled in the post that he had just got in. Now that was October 2010. Now this is 20th of November 2020. Lutfur Rahman never sat down with me to discuss that. He did sit down with me twice, and on both occasions he behaved dishonestly, and he behaved ignorantly, and he behaved with undue stupidity and lack of understanding and lack of cognitive kind of appreciation of the facts, basic facts. On two other occasions, he insulted me by giving priority to people who don't belong to the history, the continuity of the movement defending the community, and gave them kind of priority of reference, which priority was completely dishonest, untruthful, and corrupt, and constituted intentional crimes of denials of the serious, fundamental, central truth about the defense of the community and the activities. Now, this behavior by Lutfur Rahman, or this set of behavior by Lutfur Rahman, should be enough to scrap this corrupt post. Lutfur Rahman, mentally, intellectually, evidentially, has no ground to claim that he has made any contribution to the community except to disgrace this community and bring the community into disrepute. How then is it even conceivable that he should be allowed to even say anything about this post? Now, none of these will be found in the Fleet Street papers, either of the last 10 years or of today. There is nothing in the Daily Mail and the two items that are there that are kind of dodgy in terms of both the Conservative and the Labour Party. One is Priti Patel has been found to have broken the rules in bullying staff in the departments. But the other one is, of course, the item that Corbyn is about to become Labour MP again in just 3 months, and they're saying his suspension by Keir Starmer up for review. Now, of course, he has been unsuspended, but what they refer to here actually is so far Keir Starmer's refusal to let him have the kind of benefit or disadvantage of the Labour Party whip, as I explained yesterday. And they're saying that Jeremy Corbyn could be a Labour MP again in only 3 months' time. It was reported last night. Corbyn was suspended last month after saying that Labour's problem with anti-Semitism under his leadership had been dramatically overstated. We'll come to that particular phrase in a short while. He was readmitted to the party as a member on Tuesday, but Keir Starmer refused to restore the whip, meaning Mr. Corbyn will sit as an independent MP. But Labour's chief whip Nick Brown wrote to Mr. Corbyn last night to inform him that the decision to suspend him would be reviewed after 3 months. His return will be pending the results of an investigation into where he broke Labour rules, and his conduct during those months will also be taken into account. In another day of turmoil for the Labour Party, Sir Keir faced a threat to his leadership last night after members of the party's ruling body signed a letter challenging him. Hard left members of the newly elected National Executive Committee said Sir Keir's refusal to restore the whip to Mr. Corbyn flies in the face of natural justice. and so on. So what we are looking at in that context is that Keir Starmer is morally bankrupt and Jeremy Corbyn is intellectually empty. And these kind of internal disputes only highlight the deep failure of the Labour Party to admit that it has got absolutely no credibility in opposing and dealing with racism in this country or internationally. We go back to the garden gnome description that we have given to Jeremy Corbyn. If Corbyn understood the magnitude of the responsibility that his being a leader kind of entailed and brought on him, then he would not have hesitated even for once before launching the biggest war on racists and racism in the Labour Party, which he didn't do. Now, anti-Jewish prejudice is a form of racism, given the kind of composition of the mainly Western European-based Jewish people, because they are a different kind of entity. They think that they are the Jews. I mean, so much so that the African Jews in Israel are treated as second-class citizens. So the black Jews are not considered as Jewish enough by the white Jews who are in control of Israel. Now, if Corbyn was opposed to racism, and more interestingly, if Corbyn was intelligent enough, he would have absolutely prevailed against racists of all kinds, including the racists who have been violating the human rights of the African black Jews. But he hasn't. Corbyn has completely failed. And we shall be continuing on this theme in due course. And what the Daily Mail is saying in its kind of editorial, the third editorial of the day, is called A Matter of Morals. And it's having a go at Keir Starmer. And their last paragraph there is saying that stamping out anti-Semitism transcends politics and money. They're telling Keir Starmer. What they mean is that the European Jewish kind of bloc, that is what they mean. And they're saying there is simply a matter of right and wrong. They're not talking about all the Jewish people who are kind of subjected to racism. They're talking about a section of the Jewish people who happen to be in control of Israel and also in control of the main kind of lobby in the name of the Jewish population as a whole. Events in Israel over the last 20 years show that the African Jews are treated as the African people who are treated by the apartheid's South African regime. There is no coverage of that in the Daily Mail, nor indeed in the Guardian or in other papers. Now This is another kind of diversionary lie by the Murdoch scum to shore up Boris Johnson's kind of image. They're saying there are 1 million injections, vaccines a day. This hasn't happened. They're saying it will happen. So the Daily Mail is saying that Boris Johnson is saving Christmas. And Boris Johnson is telling The Guardian or The Guardian types that he's also kind of starting a green revolution, saving the planet. And here he's saying to the Murdoch scum that he's starting a mass kind of 1 million a day vaccines. So Boris Johnson has had all his problems solved. He's suddenly become active and leading the kind of attack on all the targets. And he's the go-getting prime minister. He has got the bounce back, he has got the control back, and he is not being diverted by anything going on in the kind of inner circles in the number 10 Downing Street and all the rest of it. And here, instead of talking about the kind of lies by Martin Bashir, this scum is desperate to find some kind of excuse to attack Harry. He says after Wills speaks out on the BBC's Bashir probe, Harry fails to stand by his brother on Diana and is silent, and the silence widens. Princess rift, that is, the rift between the two. Complete rubbish. And they've got long pieces about they've got an editorial in the Daily Sun, the scum, against Jeremy Corbyn being allowed to become a Labour Party MP again. Well, there's a very small item that says that 4,000 jobs are under threat as chains, shop chains kind of fold. But it's a smaller item than the 1 million jobs a day bonanza for Boris Johnson. And they're saying in the kind of showbiz column that the Crown kind of script about Diana is spot on. And the scum is now celebrating reports that the EU's negotiator on Brexit has been infected by COVID. Now, Boris said to stand by Priti Patel over bullying report. Broke minister's code, but it wasn't intentional. Of course it wasn't. So how could Boris Johnson excuse Priti Patel if she did anything intentionally wrong or prejudiced? I mean, one big lie of lies backing another liar. And here is the Daily Express saying that Boris Johnson is battling experts to save Christmas. That is what they're saying. Boris Johnson is saving everything. I mean, and they're saying that on page 2 of the Express, they're saying that Priti Patel broke ministerial code. And there is a piece by Ben Wallace that following, is it him or is it all of them? The following the rules is our best chance of a normal Christmas. So there is a contradiction there. And there are kind of pieces about Colin Rooney and what's her name? Rebecca Vardy in the libel case that Rebecca Vardy has brought against Colin Rooney. And there is a piece by Frederick Forsyth condemning John Major for supporting the EU. And there is no evidence, there is no facts, there is no report about anything of any substance. And the Daily Mirror is saying the Tories in the dock over care home scandal. Judges' ruling paves way for judicial review into coronavirus deaths. Now that's the Daily Express saying this, but it is being too optimistic about the judicial review. The judicial review is a complete con. Although they are running this one, the judicial review is not the same thing as justice, and it will not be done. Just like all the inquiries are diversions from the liabilities, as is this one. So we'll be talking about the corrupt mayor post in both Tower Hamlets and Newham. And as I have been saying, the Fleet Street newspapers are never talking about the substance of what is going on in society. Nothing about the government's failures and no accountability, no call for accountability, no call for kind of disciplining the misconduct, the perpetrators of misconduct at every level, every day. The culture in this country, as paraded by the kind of deniers of Fleet Street, is a culture of denial, culture of lying and lies. And there is no scrutiny in the papers of the kind of disparity, huge disparity between the haves, who are the few, and the many, who are the have not. And there is no examination of the money. There is report that Rishi Sunak, the finance minister, is going to get tough on the kind of victims of the already widely kind of condemned and widely kind of known fact of the restrictions on the pay of public sector employees. There is no examination of why that should be allowed to happen when Johnson has just announced 16.5 billion pounds of expenditure for the military. What is the justification for 16.5 billion expenditure for the military, except that it will suit the big business and it will suit the military industrial complex, the British version. and there are two people sitting on a bus stop, and they're saying new jab joy. Jab means vaccine. And they're saying to one another, typical, you wait all year for a corona vaccine and then three come along at the same time. This is what is said about the bus, that you wait indefinitely for the bus to come and then no bus comes and then suddenly three come at the same time. You only need one bus, but there are three of them. And the Daily Star has got Marks and Spencer has always had a very high opinion of itself. This snobby retail relic likes to think it attracts a better class of shopper. That's why it charges such overinflated prices on its old fashioned clothes and overrated food. But the huge, high and mighty high street has been is way past its sell by date. And we don't imagine many of us, our sensible readers, shop in there. After all, who'd want to buy their grab from somewhere that chops up a cauliflower and repackages it as veggie steak for £2? This chain is as stuffy and out of touch as the bloated BBC. Now, the failing farm is keen to show its woke credentials. Woke is a racist term for anti-racist. PC bosses appear to have renamed Christmas as gifting season in a bid to appease snowflakes, that is to say, to appease anti-racists. What a load of old twaddle. They need to stop twisting themselves in knots for the sake of a handful of moaning idiots. This is not just claptrap, it's M&S claptrap. Now, this is related to a piece about this one. This is the one that we have to read, this one. Marks and Spencer has been slammed over a series of social media posts in which they appear to rebrand Christmas as the gifting season. And the ads show the Canadian fashion influencer Shumidi wrapping presents. Now, Shumidi looks like a Muslim woman with her headgear. One follower said that, dear M&S, it's not gifting season, it is Christmas, a celebration of Christ's birth. Don't be ashamed to call it what it is. Catherine Ferguson wrote, what the heck is gifting season? And Joanne LOL, whatever. Now, the point is that this is the kind of thing that can be done only by also provocateurs that actually, without any consultation with or demand from people like the Muslims or the other religions other than the ones that celebrate Christmas, they create something like gifting season, and then the blame goes to all the people of other religions who have nothing to do with this kind of renaming or rebranding. It is very much like the Town Council in 2008, I think. being condemned for appeasing the Muslims over Ramadan, over a completely fabricated claim that during the month of Ramadan, non-Muslims should not eat or meat during the month of Ramadan. The council, that is. And there was no demand for this from the Muslims at all. But the Muslims are blamed for it. And there is nothing in Islam that says that non-Muslims should not be doing their normal things while Muslims do their fasting. And this Canadian so-called influencer, Shamdi or something, being dressed as a kind of hijab wearing or headgear wearing Muslim looking woman, she is being used as an instrument, as a tool to spread the hatred against Muslims for this so-called Marks and Spencer's rebranding of the Christmas as the gifting season. And there is absolutely nothing in the papers, in Fleet Street papers today, about the reality of anything being done by government, the councils, or the big business companies. And they're saying that in The Guardian that Priti Patel broke ministerial code, but they don't say that she broke anything else, because Priti Patel's main breaches are not the ministerial codes about the attitude and behavior towards employees in the government departments. Her main breaches have been and remain the breaches of all the key international kind of charters and treaties that the UK remains signed up to. And most notoriously, in the last 3 months, she has been breaching the UK's convention duties to facilitate asylum by asylum seekers. But she has been erecting racist barriers and literally sending fascistic kind of squads of military to harass these most vulnerable and endangered people trying to cross the channel. And she's being pictured in the Times in the story about guilty of bullying staff. Leaked report finds that there is so there is this report by this Alex Allen, who the Times says this Alex was asked to investigate after the Times revealed in February details of the Home Secretary's behavior towards senior staff in the Home Office and previous departments in which she had worked. And the Times says that 4 million public sector workers are to have their pay frozen. And the BBC boss says that white man's control of the news agenda must end. Now, as I have been saying, it's not enough to say that kind of, because that is a kind of staged, scripted kind of stunt. Like Greg Dyke, the racist liar, had got headlines by claiming that the BBC was hideously white. He did say that, but he said that dishonestly as a kind of soundbite in order to grab a headline. And he continued to lie for the racists in the BBC, and he's still lying. He has not apologized, nor has Emily Maitlies, nor has any of the other parts of the BBC. And the BBC does not report, just like Fleet Street does not report on the actual evidence of corruption at any level by the agencies of the state, institutions of the state. And that corruption is most odiously evident in the judicial bureaucracy and in the behavior of the licensed law traders, liars, lawyers. And there is no accountability whatsoever. And just to put in context, neither Charles Dickens, who wrote a number of pieces about the kind of so-called legal profession, nor this John Mortimer, nor any of the other writers who have written fiction, so-called, about the English legal bureaucracy has come anywhere near looking at the evidence of what goes on. And we have to look at this by chapter and verse examination. The Times says that. Now, what is the Times saying will be the kind of upshot of this one. The Times is not actually saying anything truthful about the upshot, about the Priti Patel allegations. Let's say that there will be nothing. This will be treated by Boris Johnson with contempt, and he will stand by Priti Patel, because Priti Patel is one of the kind of most useful mental slaves that the Conservatives have recruited, if you like. Well, there are others, but she is the most useful in many ways. She is more extreme in her words and utterances than Margaret Thatcher herself was, and yet she kind of aims to impress the Conservatives, the right-wingers, with the image that she has constructed or has been constructing about herself, that she is a Thatcherite. And to convince them that she is a Thatcherite, she goes the extra mile in being more extreme than Thatcher herself was on the records. And she has got the kind of lack of sense that Donald Trump has exposed himself as possessing. He doesn't care whether the truth is here or there. And this Alex Allen, the investigator, has actually confounded his own findings as leaked in the Times, because he is apparently saying that Priti Patel was denied kind of cooperation by several civil servants in the departments that she has been posted in over the years. So that cancels out any kind of so-called evidence or evidence-based findings that demand that she be sacked or she lose the job. She won't lose the job. And she will not be sacked by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson didn't sack either Dom Cummings or Lee Cain until something else happened. And the something else was that the election of Joe Biden and the kind of interest by Allegra Stratton to dominate the kind of front line. And there is this piece about the impact of COVID on court cases. Now let's see what the line is. They're quoting a man called James Mulholland, QC, as saying, very vulnerable people who go through the system are being let down. Is that news? The reason why the legal system, the legal bureaucracy, lets down the very, very vulnerable people is because of the built-in corruption, criminality, racism, and stupidity in the legal bureaucracy. And this Mulholland and others are beneficiaries and practitioners of the corruption, illegality, racism, dishonesty. So what is it saying? It is saying the Guardian piece is saying it says Owen Bowcott, legal affairs correspondent, quote, Crown Court cases are being delayed until 2023. The innocent penalized more than the guilty, and the underfunded criminal justice system brought to its knees, according to James Mulholland, QC. Now, let's not get carried away. Let's just read the first paragraph, because it is so overwhelmingly, stunningly, unbelievably pretentious that the rest of it will take the whole day to read and kind of diagnose correctly. It says the innocent are being penalized more than the guilty, and the underfunded criminal justice system is being brought to its knees. So the James Mulholland. So let's start again. The innocent are penalized more than the guilty. Of course they are. That is the beauty of the English legal bureaucracy. The innocent are always being penalized more than the guilty. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of a system that is based on corruption and the corruption of the haves by looting the have-nots. And when you add the factor of black people, people of African and Asian origin, the rate of the innocent being penalized rises significantly. When you then add the factor of Muslim to the targets, then the rate of the innocent being penalized rises exponentially, which is what we have been saying about these two known criminals. One is called Henrietta Manners and the other is called Judith Goodman. Goodman is the deputy district judge and Henrietta Manners is the district judge. Both have been connected with the Shoreditch and Clerkenwell County Court and courts, because the two courts have been merged into Clerkenwell and Shoreditch County Court. And we have said that the stunt that Robert Jenrick staged in March 2020 about banning eviction proceedings was completely misleading. Because for a start, there was no real solid acknowledgement of the wrongs that eviction proceedings actually constitute, the illegalities that the eviction proceedings constitute. And there is no explanation as to why there is no remedy available for these kind of injustices or unjust kind of violations of the rights of the targets of the eviction proceedings. Now that was March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 8 months now, and we have been investigating by following the kind of proper channel, if you like, sourcing, why the government has not kind of removed the Section 21 provision for evictions. And what are the reasons for imposing or allowing the Section 21 provision in the first place? And we have contacted the House of Commons kind of information people who could not provide any factual answer, fact-based answer as to why Section 11 was imposed. And they have not been able to give us information as to what international treaty that the UK remains signed up to have been broken by the introduction of the Section 21 provision for evicting people without any fault. That is the target of the eviction under Section 21, not having committed any wrongs. They can be still treated as if they have committed wrongs. There are in the English kind of legal kind of jungle and the kind of confusion. There are hundreds of instances of contradictions between various parts of the law. Now, Starmer, even Corbyn said more than once that Starmer was a forensic MP, forensic questioner. Starmer is a kind of lawyer, licensed law trader, licensed law barrister, and he was even in post as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Starmer hasn't raised any question about these contradictions, and nor has anyone else in the Labour Party front bench or back bench talked about the brazen, criminally incompatible contradictions between various parts of the various particular laws, including the so-called laws about housing human rights. And there is absolutely no provision in the so-called English law to seek remedies against lying barristers, QCs, solicitors, legal executives. let alone any stupid racist criminal judge or district judge or deputy district judge. So this Mulholland, who is being kind of given the prominent coverage and platform by the idiot Owen Bowcott, who is supposed to be the legal correspondent of the stupid Guardian. He's not making any sense at all, except uttering a string of stupid slogans that will not change the substance of the access, let alone the quality of the judicial process. And when we say that Owen Bowcott is an idiot, we don't say that because we don't have another word for it, but that is what he is. And the reason why we say that currently is because in the entirety of the judicial pronouncements, there is no recognition of the existence of people outside of the licensed law traders, kind of corners and cabals and kind of secret places that they inhabit, the darkness that they inhabit. There is no accountability for the judicial kind of criminality or judicial crimes. There is no authority that can actually investigate. And even if there were any kind of platform, there are about 3 or 4 separate, completely time-wasting kind of operations that are supposed to be about complaints against members of the judiciary. You start going through one of those and you have given up 1 year of your life pursuing this mirage. So the English legal bureaucracy, not only on the face of it, is corrupt and racist and obstructive and reserved for the very wealthy and the very crooked, it also has a whole range of kind of pretentious, fake kind of procedures and platforms, allegedly for investigating wrongdoing and prejudiced behavior by the members of the judiciary. And that doesn't actually work. Those platforms, those diversions aggravate the denial of the innocent. And Mulholland saying that he is shedding crocodile tears about the innocent. Does it not occur to him that even to accept that the innocent are penalized by the system is to admit that he himself is part of the crooked system, and he is only making a noise now as opposed to opposing it even before he became a licensed law trader? What we have been saying about the legal bureaucracy is that it's corrupt, it's unfit, and it's a breach of the law, constitutionally, internationally, objectively, evidentially, truthfully. So the morass, the crisis, the deadlock, the dysfunction of the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal is not confined to just Boris Johnson and number 10 Downing Street. It includes and spreads into the judicial bureaucracy, and it includes and spreads into the kind of aligned or allied kind of institutions and agencies that have been put in place in order to justify the failures and the denials and the criminality of the judicial system itself and its licensed law trading perpetrators.